Hello, Carnivore Hunters. This is Doug.
And this is Rick. Hey, today we got a really special guest with us. He's a legendary hunter here in Colorado, and
Yes.
he's got his own page. We'll share that with you here. Um, and yeah, go
That's
ahead,
that's
Doug.
quite the compliment, man. I don't think I've ever actually been called legendary hunter. Maybe my kids have called me that before, but after I prompted them to say it, So I appreciate the intro.
Well, those of us who kind of grew up hunting in Colorado, when you stumbled across your webpage and your YouTube videos, I got to tell you, yours. If ever I'm looking for something like I want to know more about thermals or something like that, like your page is one of the first places I stop. So,
That's awesome,
um,
man.
definitely appreciate what
Yeah,
you do. And obviously, Rick and I know who you are. We've all, been in Colorado here, but for those of you who don't know you, can you just give us a little background on Cliff Gray and how you got involved in outfitting and hunting?
Yeah. And sorry if the light's bad here, guys. I'm dealing with a kind of a weird light behind me. But so how I got into hunting, I guess, I mean, I hunted all as a kid all the time. My dad was an outfitter in the Vail Valley back in the late 70s and 80s when I was a little kid. So I was exposed to it that way, and I was exposed to horse and mule packing and that sort of thing through that. And then I did some other things when as a young guy out of school for 4 or 5 years. And then it really wasn't people always ask me if it was like a master plan. I'd always off and on guided, and that was kind of like a piece of my life all the time. But I don't know that I ever had a like master plan of like diving into it at like the outfitting level, but I kind of stumbled back into it when I was 24, 25, and I bought a business that I had known about as a kid. It was not adjacent to my dad's outfitting area, but not far away. It had been at one point a fairly scaled up outfitting business, and I happened to be back in the Eagle area there when I think I was 25, 26, and I ran into the guy who owned it at the time, and he really wasn't interested in continuing to own it, and it had shrunk a whole lot. They weren't really operating it to its full potential, or really much at all, to be honest with you. So I kind of bought it on a whim, and I thought it would be a hobby, and then a decade of my life evaporated into it. You know what I mean? So that's kind of in terms of how I got in, more deep into the elk hunting world, the outfitting, guiding world. That's how I got into it. And then I've guided most of the species in Colorado. I had before COVID, I was doing a bunch of stuff in British Columbia too with spring bear. So I've tried to through I think like my progression as a hunter, I've tried it, as a hunter or guide or whatever. I've tried to every year kind of do something new. So I tried to do that for 10, 12 years. And then I guess now it's been 2 seasons. I sold my primary outfitting business 2 seasons ago. Um, so since then I've been working on a bunch of different projects, and then one of my primary focuses is my YouTube channel. So I'm glad to hear you guys enjoy that stuff.
yeah. I'm like Doug. I always go and refer to your stuff. We each got a bear tag this last season, so we were watching your stuff on
Oh, okay.
skinning out a bear, and yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
You guys
Yeah.
have any luck or get any days out there?
so we hunt the southern part of the state, and it was
Okay.
so hot and dry. It was, I mean, it was terrible. Doug filled a tag, and um, it was just a rough year. Typically, we do a little better, but uh, I think I mean, it was so dusty. It was just, and then when the wind would blow, it was just nuts how bad it was.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. I ended up with one muley, but this is the first year since I've been back hunting with my brother and my dad that I didn't even see an elk
Oh
the
yeah.
entire 9 days.
Yeah.
And we kept on going higher and deeper, and I mean, usually I'll see one, even if it's 2 miles off on a couple ridges over, you'll
Yeah,
see
sure.
them. But yeah, this year they just were not around.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I'd love to hear you guys' perspective on it. It seems like, in my view, in the last, like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, there's just more. I'm sure it's just related to lower density of elk in general, at least in most of the areas that I was guiding outfitting. But it just caused more variability to hunts. You get some of those hunts that are just rough.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is since we started this carnivore and started getting healthier and fitter. I mean, we were doing some pretty high and deep hikes, and we just weren't finding them this year. It was kind of a bummer,
Sure.
but it's they're saying it's one of the strongest El Nino years on record. So I don't know if that has something to do with it. Maybe next year we'll get out of the El Nino and we can start getting the snow back in.
Sure.
Hey, before we get into some of the hunting, in our collaboration with you up to this point, you had mentioned you were carnivore for 3 years now, and we even have heard you mention it in some of your videos, like your pemmican and some other videos that this is totally carnivore or whatever it is you say. What got you started on carnivore?
I'm trying to think of what the actual trigger on carnivore was. I think honestly is probably like Rogan and those guys, like maybe like the original Sean Baker podcast. Like, I guess now it's been 5+ years or so. But I think I made the progression that a lot of folks do. I don't know how you guys got into it, but I had pretty much ate like a very low carb diet and then jumped to carnivore from that. And I would say that, I still, just to, like, for clarity's sake, I still do eat fruit. I probably eat like a serving of fruit a day, sometimes maybe 2. But outside of that, I'm fairly strict to it. Outside of, sometimes I get off kilter on holidays or if I'm staying at somebody's home or something. You guys
Right.
probably, that
Yeah.
like, if somebody, we could talk about this the whole time, just so you guys know, because I'm like, I hate to call myself like a believer, because all I can go off is like anecdotal evidence, guys, and like,
Mm-hmm.
I feel good. I feel good with it. And I take care of myself, like I work out and all that stuff, but I notice like body composition changes absolutely related to the diet. And the thing that's the weirdest thing to me, and I'm almost like, I guess embarrassed is not the word, but I'm always hesitant to say it. Everybody who I have like introduced to the diet, who's actually tried it and stuck to it, they've had positive results. Like, hasn't been, I haven't, like, I hear these things like, oh, like, even the symptom stuff. I don't know if you guys went through any, like, in your transition to it, but
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
it did. Yeah. Okay. So you guys probably had some of that. Like, outside of a little bit of that stuff, all the friends that I know, they've got positive benefits from it. So it's hard for me not to be like a huge fanboy of the thing and always talk about it. I mean,
Right.
it's like people with CrossFit or whatever, like they won't stop talking about CrossFit or whatever. It's the same thing with carnivore diet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are you still following like the bakers and the berries or do you just kind of wing it, or
You mean
the diet?
oh,
The
yeah.
channels.
So, like, you
Yeah.
mean in terms of following like Sean Baker and those guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I watched the recent podcast where he was on Rogan. I don't
Hmm.
I don't I'll be honest with you. I no longer really get in the weeds on it because I feel good with what I'm doing. The only thing that I'll do, and I'd love to hear like what your guys' perspective on it is I do keep track of my cholesterol. It's elevated my LDL cholesterol. And so I do, like, if Peter Attia has a thing on cholesterol, I kind of try to keep up to date on, what that really means. Just so I know, like, or I can make a judgment on this thing. Makes me feel great day to day, but I do have a little, just in the back of my mind, like, am I doing something that's affecting my longevity as a human? honestly, like even if it is a little bit, like it's a trade-off, right? But
Right.
it's like the one part of it that I do try to like keep up to date on, just so I'm not like being naive.
So my perspective, because I'm right there with you, man. Before I went on carnivore, my cholesterol was out of control.
Oh, okay.
My triglycerides were eight something, 850 or something, which is
Okay.
like
Yeah.
way out.
Right.
And after 2 months on carnivore, my cholesterol came back in check.
Oh,
Everything,
okay.
including triglycerides. And so now, because that is the one thing I keep up the most, that and blood pressure, because my blood pressure is still a little elevated, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
working on that. But um, Baker and Barry and all these other guys, they're starting to talk about how we need to start rethinking uh, our cholesterol. Like, have we been looking at it wrong this whole time? And
Sure.
even Baker, in one of his most recent videos, said the LDL, as you mentioned, uh, you should keep an eye on that. But there's two types of LDL: the A and the B, APO
Right.
and BPO, right? And so it's the small. I can't remember if it's the alpha or the beta.
Yeah, and
Um,
they tend to test the one that's less relevant.
yeah, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, and it's a particle count of some kind that they do. And so next time I get my labs drawn, I want to ask for that particle count. Like, am I clogging my arteries? Because I'm like you, man. I feel like I'm freaking 20 years old again, right?
Yeah.
I mean, where before I felt like I was 70, and so
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just been a huge improvement.
Yeah. Well, I want to, I don't, not to like turn the interview around you guys, but I want to hear like, what was the 60-day deal or 30-day deal when you started? Like, what did you notice?
Oh, wow. So I kind of got into this. My wife had a lot of gastrointestinal issues, and she was on some medications for her thyroid and things like that. And I was just plain overweight. So
Yeah.
had seen some of Rogan's podcasts and with Dr. Baker and the Petersons and stuff like that. So I went to her and I'm tried basically just to get her off of the drugs, right? Off
Sure.
all the medication she was on, saying, "Hey, let's try this." And she said, "Well, all right, well, I'll do it for a month." And after about 2 weeks, we both stopped snoring, which
Yeah.
I didn't start snoring until I was in my 30s. So but I always just attributed it to, well, I'm overweight, so hopefully, if I lose weight, I'll stop snoring. But frankly, I stopped snoring before the weight came off. So,
Oh, okay. That's weird. That's kind
um,
of weird. Or
yeah.
not weird. Weird just seems like, it seems like when I think about snoring, I think it's like because of the weight, you know?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what I thought too.
Well, and
In
I
any
think
case,
it's the inflammation too, right? Like they
I
talk a
got
lot
you.
about inflammation, and so I think you're inflamed, in
Yeah.
here too.
In the sinuses or
yeah, the
whatever.
sinuses are inflamed.
Yeah,
But anyway, long story short, I mean, obviously, I experienced a ton of weight loss. My wife came off all of her medications. She's no longer having any gastrointestinal pain, which she lived with for about the last decade. And I little things like arthritis, I had plantar fasciitis, all of that just kind of went away.
Sure.
So I had some eczema that went away.
yeah.
My brother and I both have a inherited condition from our mother called familial tremors, which is like a shaking.
Okay.
And I was shaking as like in junior high, like noticeably to where my friends could see it.
Oh, okay.
And we were just told by the doctors, oh, it's inherited. It's not really dangerous. It's, you just something that it won't go away. You just have to learn to live with it. And that's completely gone away.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I had a lot of the same conditions Doug did. That I had the eczema, plus I had some weird itchy skin thing. Um, like it just felt like dry skin or something. As I mentioned, my cholesterol last check was back to normal. Um, I'm predicting my next visit, I'm going to see my cholesterol elevated. Um, But I watched a Dr. Berry video where he said 1/3 of the people will lower, 1/3 will stay the same, and 1/3 will elevate. But he didn't provide any data to back that statement
Yeah.
up. And I went from pre-diabetic to type 2 diabetic, and then started carnivore back to pre-diabetic. And as of November, my A1C was normal.
Oh,
So
cool.
yeah, that was one of the most exciting accomplishments for me. And then of course the weight loss. I think between Doug and I both, we're close to 100 pounds in weight loss.
Yeah.
Dude, that's wild. You know, the weight loss is one thing, and I want to hear your guys' opinion. I try to say this so I don't sound like a total ass, but I've been lucky. I've been lucky. Like I've never been heavy. But my father's heavy. I've got buddies who are heavy. And one thing that's really interesting is like all my buddies who are heavy, who are trying to lose weight, I'm like, I always suggest it. I'm like, do the carnivore diet. And the thing that's wild is like, it works. Like if you only eat meat, I've never seen somebody get fatter only eating meat. And the thing is there's like still resistance. I'm like, dude, just try it. Try it for like a month. Cause I can like almost promise you that if you stick to it, you're going to lose weight. I find it a really interesting thing.
Tell your buddies to watch this video, and it's the fastest I've ever lost weight. For a while there, I'm at a plateau right now, but we're coming off the holidays and stuff. But I was losing 10 pounds a month on this thing. And I was eating beef, eggs, and bacon. That's all I was eating.
Yeah.
And I was eating a lot of it, like for breakfast.
Like you weren't hungry.
And honestly, just how much better you feel on a daily basis. And not even realizing, I didn't know how bad I felt until I started having all these conditions go away. I just like, oh, well, I'm getting older. I guess this is how things go.
Yeah.
And now, like Rick said, it's like, well, I'm in my 20s again. Let's, let's go ahead and hike that next ridge because I'm no longer beat.
I attributed all my ailments to old age, right? I'm 55 now. And I thought I'm just getting old. No, it's all diet. It's all diet.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, it's interesting because your guys' experience with it is what I run into. You know what I mean? I didn't really do it I didn't get into it to do it forever. I do recall that, but now I'm like, well, dude, if I don't know how you guys are, but if I do like over the holidays, I went to a big family dinner, like 4 generations were here, like my great grandparent, or my kids' great grandparents. So we all went out to an Italian restaurant, like, what am I gonna eat, right? So
Right.
I had whatever it was, but it was like a blowout of pasta or something, and I get hungover from it now. Like I get a food hangover from it. It's really weird. So I don't really have, unless something crazy health-wise statistically came out that like really proved to me like, hey, I need to do something slightly different. Other than that, I don't think I'll change.
Yeah, it was definitely for us, it was going to be a temporary thing. Like I said, my wife, she's like, I'll give it 30 days. And then after, 2 weeks into it, she's like, okay, well, let's go ahead and do 2 months. Because, we were both feeling so much better so quickly. And then, the 2 months became 3 months. And then at the end of the 3 months, she's just like, well, I don't think I ever want to stop doing this.
Yeah.
But like we do want to get beat to that point, once we're, because I still have a little bit of weight to lose, but, once we're at a position where we're comfortable and we're feeling healthy, you know what, I'm not going to pass up on a lasagna at a family meal,
Sure. Yeah.
But then you won't want to eat as much of it as you typically would have in the beginning. That's what I've found is you learn to regulate a little bit more. Because it starts to make you feel, like you said, hungover. You kind of feel sick after a while.
Yeah.
So for yours, when you're cooking now, do you do you only do the salt, or do you still use all the seasonings?
Yeah, I use I still use I eat a lot of butter still, and I cook
Hmm.
most of my meat in butter. Salt, pepper. I mean, I don't like in general. I've never been like into really like intensely seasoned food, but seasonings I do use. Like I use hot sauces on my eggs and breakfast and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
And then on steak, I will use like, I'm a lot of people I know disagree with this in terms of part of the diet, but I use like the steak seasoning and that sort of thing. I still do that, like modest amounts. I'm
Yeah.
not only salt. Yeah. Are you guys pretty strict about it?
No.
No, same
Yeah.
thing. I actually was. I've been the cook in my house for the majority of time, and I
Okay.
like to taste what I eat. You know what I
Sure.
Yeah.
mean? So I figure if I'll use anything in a seasoning amount,
Sure.
but I won't necessarily use some things as like an ingredient. You
Yeah, I
know?
got you.
I I look for sugar. If it's got sugar in it, I won't use it. Uh,
Okay.
but if it's plant based, like strictly plant based, then I'll use it. But
Yeah, but I know what you mean. Like a lot of hot sauces and stuff, they actually got a bunch of sugar in them.
Yeah.
yeah,
That
or
sort of thing.
barbecue
Yeah,
sauces, and
barbecue
yeah.
sauce.
So
Sure. Yeah. No, I understand that. What have you guys done in the backcountry to swing it into hunting? Because I think this is like a realm still needs to get figured out. On
So
hunting trips and stuff.
we
yeah,
actually, I don't know if you've seen uh, Dr. Barry's bacon recipe where he cooks a
Oh,
bunch of bacon in
I
a
have
big
it.
pot.
Okay.
So you can do several pounds at once of bacon in a big pot, and you don't get the grease splatter.
Okay.
And it takes, I did, I think, 3 or 4 pounds in less than a half an hour.
Okay.
So we did that, and then we took my deer jerky recipe, Rick's deer jerky recipe, because mine's a little sweeter, his is a little saltier.
Okay.
And we put the bacon and both deer jerkies into single bag, and that was our meal for the day when we were out.
Yeah. Okay. So you got you guys have figured out the whole fat thing.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
yeah, dude, that took me a while. Like,
Me too.
to realize, like, oh, you gotta, if you're not used to it, you gotta consume like by a normal person's standards, like an absurd amount of fat. If you're,
yeah,
like most people are
yeah.
grossed out, like rolling up bacon, shoving it in your mouth while you're hiking down the trail or whatever.
And now,
Yeah.
as long as we're on the subject, we're watching your pemmican video. Which recipe was your favorite of those that you did? Because
Yeah.
we're going to try that for this next hunting
Excuse me.
season this year.
Yeah, and I need to excuse me, guys. I'm getting over a little holiday cold. So I need to actually update that video. So my favorite my favorite like seasoning that I put in it is actually the red pepper one. Um
Mhm.
and you can do it. So I believe in the video I use some honey. You can do it without honey, and I still like the red pepper one. Um, to be honest with you, my least favorite is the berry one. I don't know. It's to me, it's like a weird. It's just a taste thing, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you guys eaten much of the pemmican?
No.
No.
Yeah, so it's like I shouldn't say acquired, but I would guess because you guys have been on a carnivore diet and you're consuming like a lot of fat that you're gonna like it. Almost universally, people who I've been with who don't eat a high fat diet, they can't tolerate it. Like they think it's pretty gross, just from
Yeah.
like a taste perspective or whatever. But I find with it that it's on certain hunts, it's the perfect snack because the daytime and nighttime temperatures keep it where it's easy to handle, it's easy to eat. If it's too hot, it's a pain in the ass to eat. You know what I mean? Because there's so much grease.
Yeah.
So
It gets gooey.
yeah, so the next
Yeah.
time I make it, and I'm gonna try to do like a video on it and just try to make the one video I did, just redo it so it's a little more concise. It doesn't need to be 40 minutes long. But the other thing I'm going to do is, you know, do you guys know what Otter Pops are? Like my kids eat them, like the frozen ones. I'm going to package it like that. That way on my warmer hunts, I can just squeeze it in my mouth.
Oh, there you go.
Does that make sense?
So, so you use it like your vacuum sealer?
Yeah, like probably what I'll do, I have to figure out some solution, but I'll probably do it in my vacuum sealer, but just in rectangle, you know, like wide rectangle ones, like a stumpy little pack. That way I can just push it out one end. You know, if you package it like bars and you're reaching in there all the time and it's warm, like your hand will start shining like with the fat and stuff. So it's not real great that way. The other way that and I didn't figure this out myself. I saw it somewhere, somebody told me. The other thing to do with it is literally like, if I don't know if you guys have jet boils or you got your little camp, you know, your a pot on the fire or whatever, is to just push it into water and make like a beef stew out of it. It's good.
Yeah. I have seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah. The first time I ever heard of pemmican was like a year or two ago, and there's another YouTube channel out there called the Bearded Butchers, I think it is.
Oh yeah, they do a good job.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. But they one of the guys pulled out like some 10-year-old pemmican. It was all vacuum sealed.
Yeah,
and they pulled it out, and it's 10 years old, and they're sitting there like, it's not bad. Yeah. So because it's supposed to have an extremely long shelf life, which is why they say it's the ultimate survival food.
I mean, as long as you render the fat, you know, as long as you get the fat rendered good, I don't see why it would go bad. You know, I mean, when I make it, I get the meat so dry, like way beyond what you would do for jerky. You know what I mean?
Right.
I just get it crazy dry because you're gonna grind it up anyways. Right. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so you just get it like where it just cracks easy. Throw it in the blender. You're gonna grind it up anyhow. So unless you had like, you know, you didn't trim the meat real well or whatever, I don't see why it wouldn't have long shelf life. Now I've eaten a bunch of it that's year and a half years old, and I don't notice any difference at all.
Right.
So it's kind of an amazing one, you know. I've tried all sorts of other things too. It's you know, if I don't know if you guys do like any backpack hunting or whatever, but if I kick back eating mountain houses or something, it gets me totally screwed up.
Yeah, we haven't done any really backpack hunting other than, you know,
the day pack.
Your day hunting,
the day pack. Sure. And but we'll still go, especially this year. We were getting in there pretty deep, just trying to find the elk. But yeah, we typically hunt right out of a camper.
Sure.
We're the ones on the ATVs that we'll drive to a certain point and then we'll hike in an additional, you know, 2-3 miles or whatever. So
that's an underrated. I personally think it's an underrated way to hunt.
Yeah, you know I do too. It was funny because probably 3 or 4 years ago, it was before COVID, but I remember I was out there hunting and there's this guy, and I'm assuming it was his son. They're walking down the road or down the trail, and I'm driving, getting ready to drive past him. So you know how hunters do. They're like, "Hey, how you doing? You seeing anything?"
Yeah, sure.
You know, just being friendly with each other. So I stopped, and it was funny because I'm like, "Hey, how you guys doing?" And he's like, "Be doing a hell of a lot better if it wasn't for all these damn ATVs out here. You guys are scaring them all off." And I just looked at him. I was like, "Okay." And you could tell his son was just like, "Oh my God, Dad, I can't believe," because the guy and his kid saw my face like, I'm shooting them. I don't know what's wrong with you, man. So
people can be funny about that, but but I think, man, like, you know, covering ground with vehicles, if it's the right type of unit, and then hiking into like little spot. It seems like these elk, man, like there's so many guys now that hike way in, and those elk that are way in are already getting pressured. Like when I was outfitting, because I didn't outfit in that first like like 3.5 miles, 4 miles. Like I didn't touch it because all my camps and just like how my permitting was, it was further, right?
Right.
Well, I cannot tell you how many guys would backpack into 5, 6, 7 miles and they would just run into my pressure,
Right.
and that's it's not necessarily like that everywhere, but there's a lot of places where you backpack in and you run into other guys that are backpack hunting, and just like the
Yeah.
nature of the topography, a lot of times, like once you get back in a basin, you can't get out, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas,
Right.
those units where you can get around, I think traveling with whatever it is, however you get around, and then doing hiking into the little spots where they get less pressure, it can be a good way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of our next questions was going to be, how did you get into hunting? I think you already answered that.
Yeah.
Um, but I had a question for you. I watched one of your videos where you were talking about how sometimes you pack, when you're guiding, you pack these guys in and then they get in some sort of a panic mode or something, and you got to take them out early. Um, how, and I'm assuming those are all first time hunters, right? If you get in a situation, how often do you see that?
So it wasn't always first time hunters. A lot of times it would be first time like altitude guys, or first time like going into the
Mm.
wilderness areas.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
so I think probably both for you, Rick and Doug, it's probably sounds like a little bit odd because you guys probably through your childhood and being from Colorado, a lot of the stuff you take a lot of stuff for granted when you're in the mountains, right? Like you're
Hmm.
used to the
Right.
mountains. The mountains don't scare you. You've probably traveled a lot in the dark in the mountains, like all
Yeah.
those things. And I think even as grown men, like we forget that not everybody has the same exposure. Well, when I was outfitting you, you realize that pretty quickly because you have to deal with people, and you have to deal with people. I packed out a lot of people after 24 hours. Like it wasn't like 20% of them, but it was like 1 out of 20 guys, probably 5%. You know, um, or maybe a little less than that, whatever. But if I was outfitting with enough hunters, like I dealt with it every season pretty much. I would be packing
Really?
out. Oh yeah.
Yep.
Um, so every week of archery and every week of rifle, no, for sure, I would pack out. I mean, not like every single one, but for the most part, we would average packing a hunter out within the first 24, 36 hours. And so I think there's a couple things, man. And if I get real long winded on this, you can just stop me. But I think people traveling to Colorado, I think a lot of them push it. They drive through the night. They've got buddies, so they think they're just gonna like, you drive, I drive, and then they get to somewhere. And then in terms of if they were hunting with me, once they drove to Colorado, then they were exposed to a bunch more logistics, right? Like unpack your stuff, put it on horses. We get you into camp. Once you're in camp, you gotta, if it's a drop camp, you gotta cut firewood. All of a sudden you've bumped up elevation by 9,000 feet, 10,000 feet, archery season, maybe 11,000 feet from sea level. So you're like, it's like they pile on so many things that they could probably deal with a couple of them, but when they pile so many on, they just get psychologically busted. And then, so I think there's a component of that. And I think the other component that I ran into a bunch was the altitude. Guys manifesting panic attacks out of the altitude. It's pretty
Mm.
common. And I don't know if you guys have buddies who come in from out of state or whatever, but I'm amazed. Like I've taken all these medical classes over the years. Like I've taken all the wilderness first aid stuff and wilderness first responder stuff, like, and done my recertifications 100 times. And whenever they talk about altitude, I always wonder why they don't talk about this. Cause at least for me and my exposures to hunters, it was very prevalent. And it would always show itself the same way. Like a guy would get up, usually an older guy that had like maybe legitimate concern, right? So he's 60, 65, maybe a little heavy. He talked to his doctor 6 months ago, told me he's going on an elk hunt. And the doctor's like, hey, make sure and take a baby aspirin every day because you might be somebody prone to heart attack, right? So it's on the guy's mind, right?
Right.
So
Right.
the guy gets up there, he sleeps like just crap for the first night or even into the second night, and then he just starts to get that like panicky feeling, and you cannot. I've tried. I mean, one thing is like when you're outfitting, there's always this deal. Like, I'm not going to go tell a guy like, "Hey, like, dude, I think you're being a weenie here." You know what I mean? Like, I can't
Right.
do that. I can't, because there's a bunch of there's issues with that.
Yeah.
But
Right.
I would talk to guys and be like, if you feel like if you're able to breathe, you're able to calm down, and you don't have any of the other major symptoms of further long altitude sickness, try to tough it through, because a lot of times it goes away. But a lot of guys, I mean, I can't tell you how many guys told me, like, Cliff, I think I'm having a heart attack. I mean, I packed a lot of guys at 2 a.m, 1 a.m. Which is like, I mean, if you're up there and you're a 3-hour horseback ride in and you think you're having a heart attack, like, I get it. Like, I get it. You don't want to die up there. And, it's not common, but people do. Thank God I never had it happen, but it is what it is. You're doing something that's exerting you and you're at altitude, but it's amazing how much altitude can manifest itself into a much bigger kind of panic attack. I saw it a lot. I don't know if you guys have ever noticed that amongst people.
No, we do have some family from Texas and, friends and family from other areas that, come from sea level or
Sure.
not much higher, that come up here, and they struggle. Just, I mean, they'll go out and buy those cans of oxygen just to,
yeah. You think those things help?
They say it does.
Sure.
I don't know.
I think it might be psychosomatic, but
placebo. Placebo, whatever. Who cares? If it works, it works.
Yep.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well,
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead. Oh, the last thing I was going to say on that subject is I actually think a lot of grown men get homesick, and that causes them issues. They just haven't been away from their family for 3, 4, 5, 6 days. How
about females? Have you guided a lot of females?
Yeah, just given the demographics, not a lot. But I have guided them, and I probably have guided like a biased sample of females. The vast majority of the females I've guided were studs, and they've done a lot of hunting. I've guided several of them on sheep hunts and goat hunts, and it's hard for me to comment on a difference because I think the nature of some of those hunts, they were females that have hunted a ton.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I'm sure you've seen a whole lot of mind-boggling things. What's the scariest thing you've ever done or seen on a hunt?
I'm trying to think. So the scariest thing for sure, which may not be the most interesting thing to talk about, but for sure is the scariest, is horse wrecks. Horse wrecks 3, 4, 5 miles in or 3 hours into a wilderness area are the scariest thing for a guide or outfitter, because people can die for sure. And you do, I think if you're in that business, that's something that you plan. It's not like it's totally the most unsexy part of the business because everybody thinks it's about hunting, but a really good outfitter who has horses and mules, they plan around the idea of making sure nobody gets hurt, their staff or clients, when it comes to horses and mules. To everything, right? Like, just sifting through and getting rid of ones that you just think like something's not, that one we just can't trust, or or this one we can't pack bears on, it'll go berserk. This one we can pack everything on. These mules we pack any meat on. Like, we had that all written down because we knew, like, on a chart in my barn. Because like if you took a client in and you thought that Leroy could pack a bear because you'd packed 20 elk on him, and you got in there next to a bear and he's huffing and puffing and there's no way you're going to get it on him. That's like, those are the scary things. Just because, I have mules that were, incredible animals, and in certain situations, they were scared. And there's no way a guy, regardless of how mountain man he is going to change the mind of a 1,200-pound mule. You know what I mean?
Right.
Up in the dark in the wilderness. So that would be, that's probably like the scariest moments I had were, the few, luckily fairly minor accidents I dealt with around horses and horse wrecks. In terms of like hunting stuff, personally, my scariest moment, or I don't know if I call them scary, but like adrenaline pumping moments were hunting lions for sure. Just getting in, like crawling in caves to get dogs with lions and that sort of thing. Those are for sure like get your heart jumping out of your chest sort of deal.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, I bet.
And have you guys lion hunted?
I have once.
Okay, sorry guys. Is that me?
That's weird. My smoke alarms are going off.
You might want to check on it, dude.
Yeah.
It seems to have stopped, but let me go. I'll be right back.
Yeah,
You guys,
me and Doug will keep it going. You shouldn't have started cooking the ribeye before we got
Right.
right. I'll be right back.
So so what about how about the funniest things you've seen? Like, is there just something that
oh, the
you don't have to
funniest
name
thing.
names?
Dude, the fun. So, it's funny, Doug, because like I think some of these clash together, right? Like some of the high anxiety, maybe like dangerous scenarios. You also like, it's in a sick way. I think outfitters and guides find humor in that, and I think clients do too. Once it gets like over with and
Right.
everybody's okay. But I had an instance, and he was a high level, C-level guy of a public company, great guy, and I took him and several of his buddies on it was like a July wilderness area fishing trip. Everything good, Rick?
My wife is cooking.
Oh, okay. But your house is not on fire, right?
Not yet.
But anyways, I was telling Doug about this time I took these guys on a fishing trip, and it was in July, and it was a horseback deal, and so one of the guys that I had not had out before, his name was Tim, and then his buddy Tom had invited him, and they had their wives with them, and we had another couple with us too. But anyways, I remember Tom had gone on several trips with me. And people always ask about my cowboy hat in the videos and stuff. And he actually gave me that cowboy hat years ago as a tip. But anyways, I had him as a client before. Great horse guy, just a good guy who loved doing wilderness trips. Anyways, we're going down the trail, and we're going to one of my most remote camps. It's probably like 10, 11 miles, 12 miles into the flat tops. And it's in a beautiful area, and it's about 11,000 feet. And we were literally dropping into the top of this bowl, and you can see the camp. This is like we've been riding for 4 or 5 hours, and I'm in the far back. And then I've got one of my guys, Sam, with Tim and Tom up front, and they go around the corner into the conifers to this last climb and drop in. And I've got 5 or 6 mules with me, and I hear as they vanish, I hear a bunch of clashing and a little bit of hollering, but not crazy bad, like a horse wreck. I know exactly what it is. I've heard horse wrecks before. I'm like, oh man. So Tom comes riding back down the trail, slowly, and he looks at me and he goes, "Cliff, I'm pretty sure Tim's dead." And I'm like,
oh,
the way he said it, I was like, oh, I think he's I think he's serious,
Right.
So I'm like, all right. So we cruise up there, and there's mules and stuff just kind of scattered down below us. And then we don't see Tim, but then I see his horse, and this thing's steep, it's a steep switchback. And I see his horse, and his horse is standing, saddle on its side, and it's standing on a rotten log. like a picture, you know, of like all 4 feet are together, like on something this big, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like sitting there scared, you know, and I can't see Tim. So I'm like, you know, maybe Tom's right. And I remember because I had never seen Tim without his cowboy hat on, and I didn't realize he was bald. And so it was like hilarious, awesome, and just like a huge relief when I saw like this shiny bald head pop up. And because his cowboy hat had blown off. And he goes, I remember he sticks his hand up and he's like, I'm okay, guys. And his hand is like this. And I swear to you, like only this finger was straight. All the other ones were crooked at like 90 degrees. Like his hand's broken in like 80 spots. And I'm just like, but that was the extent of the injuries, which in this case was like awesome. You know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, Doug. So that was like, I maybe I'm sick for saying it was funny, but it's a great story afterwards. And when I still keep in touch with those guys and we still laugh about it. So that
I was going to say, I'm sure they're laughing about it too.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's the best part, right? I mean,
yeah, when stuff goes sideways, it's always funny the next year. I mean, I think that's something that hunters and like, you know, veterans share.
Yeah.
Just
there's
that
some
sense of humor
when it's happening, but then when it's over, you know, you go back, you drink a beer and you laugh about it.
Yeah, dude. And that's people ask me about like hunting partners and stuff. That's one of my main criteria. If you don't have guys that can laugh about it afterwards, you got to get different hunting partners because it's for sure going to happen, you know.
Well, we were going to ask you next about the funniest story.
Well, actually, I just asked him.
Oh,
that was it, man.
You were both off having your own funny encounter, so.
So recently we saw you were soliciting for some bear hunt or something you were going to put on. I can't.
Oh yeah. So I do some hunting seminars and I try to combine them with a hunt. And so do you guys watch Alone, the show Alone?
I have watched several of those. It's been a while though.
Oh, okay. So I've got a buddy. His name is Jordan Jonas. He actually won it one year. He's the guy who shot the moose on Alone. But anyways, he has an outfitting area in Idaho. So this year. I'm going to do it in the spring. So I have so many guiding obligations in the fall, like September and stuff. I'm going to do the hunting course / seminar on those spring bear hunts. I'd love to promote it, but it booked up in like a couple hours. So, but I might try to add like 4 or 5 spots here. I've been going back and forth with a few guys, but it's just dates and logistics and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So cool.
So when you're guiding, do you go back and work for the person that you sold your previous company to, or do you just do things with old clients that you've established a relationship with, or?
So a little bit of both. I've got a ranch that I guide for a lot of archery elk season that's in Oregon, and then and that's a private ranch. And then I've still been guiding early September. Usually it's sheep and goat hunts in Colorado, and those are for the guys that I sold my business to. Nice. There's a few areas that I know pretty well. And the funny thing about it is like I did so many of those hunts over the years. A lot of the guys that I guided on a sheep hunt, now they've drawn a goat tag, or I guided them on a goat hunt and now they've drawn a sheep tag. So it's a lot of times there's like a gap of like 7 or 8, 10 years in between. So it's kind of interesting to see people that you enjoyed a hunt like 10 years ago with, and now you're doing a new hunt with. So I still do those. Sometimes, I mean, people, even my own family ask me like why I continue to guide, Doug. And I like it. And the reality is some of the hunts, it's very hard. I'm just not going to be able to do them. I'm not going to be able to do those sheep hunts and that sort of thing unless I'm guiding. Right. And I don't know, like, I feel weird. To be honest, like, I don't think the YouTube thing is like really super aligned with my personality. And I think maybe one of like the the uh the things that makes me feel better about it is I try to keep my own learning going through guiding. Like if I just quit hunting altogether and then was doing like, how-to stuff on YouTube, I just feel like an idiot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hey, so two questions then you just triggered for me. First question, in Oregon, are you doing the Roosevelt or the Rocky Mountain? And then do you get any, like, do you get to pick your own season to go hunt for your own food, or are you just too busy hunting for other people?
Yeah, so in Oregon, it's Rockies. It's in Eastern Oregon.
Okay.
So I've never guided Roosevelts. I used to see him in British Columbia quite often, like the coastal mountains and that sort of thing. Pretty cool animals. But I've never guided for him. But then my own personal hunting, I tend to do it in like the shoulder seasons. And I don't know that I view, at least anymore, when I was outfitting ruins hunting, because you're maximum. If you're trying to make a living at it, the reality is if they're hunting seasons, it's such a seasonal business. If you're truly trying to make a living out of it, you have to monetize your time during the hunting seasons, right? So
Yeah.
it's just reality of it. I did a lot less hunting when I was outfitting, but when I'm just guiding, I don't view it as limiting, Rick. If I guided you on a hunt, I view it very similar to if me and you just went on a hunt as friends. Like it's like, it's still hunting. So I think I have like a healthy attitude about that, and so I try to do like one hunt a year. The other thing is, man, I have other like part of the reason I come down to Puerto Rico is like I'm an obsessive spear fisherman, and and that's been like a different path for me where I'm very new to it, and I have like a very beginner's mind to it, and I'm around people that are like that have done it their whole life, and so it's kind of a different deal where I'm not going to say I like it more than hunting. I think I like the process of kind of improvement in that world, maybe a little bit more because I'm so new to it.
Yeah. Well, because you have more, you can you can grow faster because
I think
you're so new at it, and so that all that relatively rapid personal growth feels a lot better, definitely more rewarding.
Yeah, that's a good. I mean, it's a really good point, Doug. I think that like elk hunting, whatever you're doing, when you first start, like you notice the improvements, right? Like, like I pay attention to the wind now, and it works. Like it's like boom, boom, boom. But and even in elk hunting, like I have a ton to learn, so it's not that, but it's more small little improvements.
Yeah.
Are there any other interesting stories you think you'd like to share that the viewers might like to hear?
Other stories? I don't know, man. I have to be like, I got lots of stories, but I have to be like prompted in like a category. I'd have to think about it. I don't, to be honest with you, Rick, I don't think I have any that I can fit in 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, I was just looking at the time. I know you're a pretty busy guy right now. So,
yeah. So,
man, I don't,
we're lifelong public land hunters.
Yeah.
What would be your best advice for us?
Yeah. So lifelong public land hunters, do you guys only hunt Colorado?
So far.
So I have hunted Oregon myself. That's why I was asking you about the elk, but I have hunted Oregon, but yeah, mostly Colorado.
Yeah. I mean, my general advice to public land hunters is if you're happy where you're hunting and you feel like there's some elk around and you can figure them out more and you can progress, I suggest that you view your spots as like long-term engagements, right? Really try to learn those spots. Hopefully you still have tag availability there over the years if things change, whatever, because it's really hard. I mean, I find it even, when I go guide different places, you have to go learn a new area. there's a big downside to that. So that's one of my pieces of advice. You know, the one thing though is like in Colorado, a lot of that's changing. A lot of places, you know, you guys may be hunting units that you can't draw every year, right? So I think maybe like a secondary thought on that is to have a plan, right? Like, hey, we're gonna hunt this season for this unit every 2 years because of the point situation, but we can, in the interim years, we can hunt this other area. We'll learn both of the areas really, really well. You know what I mean? I think that's a big one. I mean, one thing that I noticed, like in the last, it seemed like, and it could be unique to my area, it probably is to some extent, like that Vail Valley saw a big decline since my dad's outfitting days to when I was outfitting. You know, even in the published stats, there's 20% the elk there were. You know what I mean? So you got, there's way less elk. And what I would say is like this is going to sound like the corniest advice ever, but outside of your group that you hunt with, Rick, Doug, you know, you've got a couple family members you hunt with or whatever. Once you find pockets of elk, don't tell anybody. Don't open your mouth
we're
at
right
all.
there with you.
You know, because the way the hunting is in Colorado now, these, like, if you're hunting post rut bulls, basically all the rifle seasons, maybe first rifle, maybe not so much, but for the most part, you're hunting post rut bulls, they'll go back to the same spots. And if you've got the guys that are like big, you know, just are rifle elk killers in Colorado, like consistently that I know, and every year they kill a bull, they've got like 7 or 8 spots they tell nobody about. Sometimes they're really hard to get into, sometimes not so much, but they don't tell anybody about, and they hunt those little spots and they'll kill a bull every year, because even if there's 1/5 the bulls, they're still using the same little post rut bull, you know, holes they go to, and those guys won't tell anybody, you know. And the reason is like, you know, you get these little bachelor groups of bulls that are like, I mean, you could go into one of these spots. I used to see it all the time. Like, and as an outfitter, you know, you outfitting is totally different, because you find one of these spots and you got a guided camp, and there's 2 sublegal bulls in there. There's a couple raghorns, and there's a 6x6. The 2 raghorns and the 6x6 are getting killed. You know what I mean? If you got, you know, but a guy that can find those little holes, you know, you can find a hole that's got 3 bulls in it. It's got a barely legal bull, a raghorn, in a bigger bull, or a couple raghorns. You can shoot one. You go back in there next year, those 2 other bulls are probably going to be using it at some point, and you can kill one of those, you know. Even if there's even if like the overall population of elk reduces, but you know, if you tell one other guy, he's going to tell 2 guys, and then, you know, they're going to go kill the whole pocket.
Right.
So it's such corny advice. It sounds stupid to say, but
I think you hit every point that we already try to follow.
So, I'm sure. Yeah, you guys are, you're in your 50s and you've been hunting. Don't tell people your good spots.
right. So,
but it matters, dude. Like, I know so many people that are dumb about it, you know?
Yeah. I used to hunt with a guy that, for a few years, and I'd watch him flat out lie to people. Oh, have you seen any elk? Oh yeah, they're over there. And we're going the other way. I was like, man.
Dude, I hate to say it, Rick, because this is going to make me sound horrible. But to me, that's not lying. And I don't know why. You know what I mean? Like, because it obviously is. But like,
you're out.
The thing is,
out in the open, they could be. Go ahead.
If you told me that, I assume you're lying. And I don't view you as a lesser person. You know what I mean? Like,
it's a wide open space. They could be anywhere.
Well, that's the reality too.
With all the pressure, who knows which way they're going?
Yeah. No, that's true. I always, it's so weird. I mean, a little misinformation. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's kind of in the culture of hunting. Let's be honest.
Yeah, it is.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, we had a guy this last year say, oh, you're going back over there. Oh, there's already like 20 people back in there, and I'm like, okay, that's where I'm going then. We get back there, it was just the one person he was with that was back there.
Sitting on a little
Well,
knob watching some elk for the last few days, probably.
and then there was this guy who was a logger. There was some logging going up, going on
Yeah.
in the area we hunt. And he comes over and he's like, man, I saw all kinds of sign over here. And he's showing us on the map. And he's like, I'm looking at him. And he's like, oh, I don't hunt this area. I don't give a shit. And so
Yeah.
I
Dude,
kind of believe.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I
The best tips I've ever gotten are from like old farmers, old ranchers, guys moving irrigation pipe or whatever, who got,
Yeah.
they're not into hunting. They'll give you good solid info. A guy in camo, good luck.
Yep.
Right.
But I don't fault. I don't fault the guy. But
Yeah.
but I guess being vague is fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, also as a professional hunter and outfitter, what do you want non-hunters to know and understand about hunting?
Yeah, that's a really good question, man. And I don't know that my answer has anything to do with guiding and outfitting, to be honest with you, Doug. I always viewed guiding as outfitting as just like a service, to
right,
hunters.
but you're just so much more experienced.
Yeah.
Rick
No,
and I are out for a
yeah.
week a year,
Yeah. I think, there's probably a bunch of different things. It'd be a long conversation, but I actually think the hardest thing to tackle with somebody who's a non-hunter is for them to understand how integral it can be to hunters, right? Like I just put a wolf post up on the wolf, they just reintroduced some wolves or whatever.
Yep.
On Instagram. Is fairly popular. And I don't respond to a lot of comments because once those things get popular, they get like mostly negative or whatever, but I read a lot of them. I scroll through them. And it's interesting because what I notice about people a lot of people are like, well, I don't care if the wolves eat elk that hunters are going to shoot. I'd rather wolves eat them. Right. And I get their perspective, but part of that tells me that they have no idea how meaningful a hunting opportunity is to a hunter. Right. And I think that's probably, what I would try to do my best to explain, like hunting, fishing, spear fishing, getting my own food, like this stuff, like it's kind of like my existence. And I think it's probably a big chunk of your guys's too, and it's so hard. I think if somebody, particularly if you're talking to somebody who's not really passionate about anything at that level, it's very hard to explain to them like, hey, like, if a wolf eats, 10 bull elk, like I get it. I'm not like, I don't think that, all wolves should be dead, but I do view it as a negative because it means 10 other people, it means 10 people can't pursue those animals and do something that's really, really important to them. So that's my long answer, man.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's I think we have, as hunters, we have a relationship with our food that most people won't ever understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, I agree. I do think your guys' concept with the whole carnivore hunters deal is pretty cool because people in the carnivore diet community who don't hunt, they're very open to hunting. I don't know if you guys have noticed that.
Not yet. The people that we have talked to, the other carnivores are open to it. And in fact, our very first interview was with Laura Russell, who she's a nurse and she hunts. She's out in Illinois. She's awesome. She talked to us about some of her hunting experiences, and I've watched her talk to some of her carnivore girlfriends, and they seem open to it, or they're certainly not critical of it.
Yeah.
But that was the whole concept when we first got on this whole carnivore journey. Is I was watching all these videos and I'm like, man, it would be cool to get our message out there. But there's so many channels out there already, and we thought, oh, we're kind of unique because we hunt for our food. So we have a freezer full of deer and elk already. So I mean, we have some videos where we're cooking with deer meat and we're cooking with elk meat, and so we're The funny thing is too, how much like when you grind your deer or your elk or whatever, how much fat do you add to yours, or do you add fat?
Yeah, so so I generally will add. I don't add a lot because I can always add it like later via like bacon or whatever. But I do. I tend to add like 10% beef fat, just so it aligns with the diet for me at least more. Do you guys add fat?
Not not at first.
Yeah, you
You
add it
know,
later.
yeah, I remember the first deer I ever shot. My dad said, "How much fat do you want to add to it?" And he's asking me all these questions about. I'm like 14 or 13 or something. I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm a kid. And but I remember when he asked about the fat, I said, well, none, because saturated fat's bad for you. Well,
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
turns out it's not. And so Doug and I both have this freezer full of meat that has zero fat added to it.
Yeah.
yeah.
And but moving forward, that'll change.
Oh, I see what you. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
do
yeah.
maybe 10 or 20% moving forward, or
Yeah.
like you said, just add it later.
Well, and that's what I did. I'm almost out of habit with my deer this year's. I said, yeah, no fat, but I figured, I have a can full of bacon fat and
Yeah,
gonna
sure.
render some
Yeah,
beef tallow or use some butter, and I can just add more now. I mean, that's what I've been doing with the stuff that we already had frozen. So
Yeah,
yeah,
you can add more. And the thing is like I don't know what if you guys have a view on this, but I actually prefer beef fat in my diet versus pork fat. I'll eat pork fat because there's a lot of convenient ways to eat it. But
mhm.
I actually in my game meat, all like sausages and that sort of thing, I do less of that or I do them myself just because I prefer to do it with like beef fat. I don't know if you guys have an opinion on that or not.
no, I agree.
No,
I would prefer the beef fat.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so
Yeah,
you can do that. But it's that I guess we can wind up with this because I'd love to hear your guys' opinion. But it's one thing that I find really interesting. I always ask people that I feel like are more in the know of it is like, okay, the one thing that I think is fairly a viable idea around the carnivore diet is that it's probably pretty similar to what a lot of our our history is, right? Like as hunter and gatherers, we
mhm.
probably ate this way in some sense, right? Or a certain genetic history of humans for sure. They primarily ate meat. I think that's pretty
yeah,
much a fact, right? The
yeah,
thing is that like the availability of fat, like, because a lot of people know that I'm on a carnivore diet, and they also know I hunt, and they're like, "Oh, that's awesome for you because you can just eat a bunch of game meat." If I ate a bunch of game meat, I would starve to death.
Right.
If I only ate game meat, and so it's actually something that like I wonder in my mind, like, yeah, what there's like this clash, right? Like, why is that the case? Like, how did people who were only eating game meat survive, right? Because where were they getting the fat? And I mean, I know there's some explanations, but I didn't know if you guys thought about that at all.
I have, and I think it comes down to a lot of, especially when you talk about people during like the Ice Age, we were
Yeah,
mainly going after megafauna, mammoth
yeah,
and things like that that had significantly more fat than our deer and elk do today. Um,
sure.
I think that was probably a big part of it. Plus, I think they were getting when they whatever they got, they were getting whatever fat they could off of that carcass first.
Yeah,
If
they're
that
probably
meant
eating
the
all
eyes
the
and the
internal fat and
brains.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
yeah.
I think you're probably right. I kind of wonder too. I kind of wonder if their body composition wasn't just smaller and leaner too. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Who knows? You see like I'm like a nerd about this stuff. I watch like the history, and they're all so much. They're smaller than us. They were
Oh
all
yeah.
Yeah,
smaller than us. We all
yeah,
three of us would be giants compared to these people we're talking about. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So
yeah.
I don't know. I just think it's kind of interesting.
It
Yeah,
is.
me too. We kind of geek out on the same stuff. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe one day we'll meet you on the mountain somewhere and we can have a deeper discussion on this
Yeah,
kind of
of course,
stuff. But
guys. I I
yeah. Do you
um,
I
ever
I had fun.
do you ever hunt southern Colorado, or are you pretty much up there in the Vail Valley?
I um I have hunted down there around Pagosa Springs and Chama and that country. I've done some guiding over the years down there too. It's beautiful.
Yeah, if you're ever down that way, let us know,
Okay,
especially
for
around
sure.
hunting season.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. Yeah, show us
sure.
some tips.
Yeah.
But anyway, Cliff, thank you again for doing this, man. We really appreciate it. Before we go, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, everybody's best bet is YouTube. If you go to YouTube and in the search bar, you just put my name, Cliff Gray, or my Instagram is Cliff GRY. Both of those are the best ways to keep up to date with what I got going on. I appreciate you guys' time, and I wish you guys the best of luck on your concept and stuff. I think if you keep doing it, it'll continue to get traction.
Yeah, we
Appreciate
sure
that.
hope so. One last thing that we want to sign off with. We recently came up with a tagline, and this is something none of the other carnivores are talking about, right? So the big thing is grass fed beef, right?
Yeah.
But the one advantage we still have over the grass fed beef is the animals we get, throughout our hunting season, is it's steroid free,
And
antibiotic free,
wild fed,
wild caught,
and field to table.
field to table,
Nice.
man.
So
It's
You
the
guys,
best.
you guys got it all. You know what's crazy about this whole video, guys? Like we started talking about carnivore, we started talking about hunting, you finished off with that tagline. It sounds like a huge infomercial, but we have nothing to sell people.
right.
Nothing.
Right? That's the crazy thing about carnivore is I have a sneaking suspicion it hasn't become popular until now because there's nothing people can sell. It's like just go buy the meat at the grocery store.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're literally telling people, go get a hunting license, find a friend who will show you, take you out, show you the ropes.
Yeah.
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 But if
That's
you want to
funny.
support the Carnivore Hunters, we're
yeah,
starting
there
to
you
come
go.
out with some swag.
Yeah.
So
You guys got merchandise? I like it. And
Yeah,
where,
yeah.
Is it just you, on YouTube you could buy it right off of there? Or you guys got a website?
right now we just have it linked in some of our YouTube videos.
Oh, okay.
In the
Cool.
description, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
But
Good deal.
So-
I'll check it out.
all
Man,
right.
it was great talking to you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah,
Yeah, of
thanks,
course,
Cliff.
guys.
We really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Happy New Year's, guys. I'll talk to you later.
All right.
Happy New Year.